So let me ask you a question. Do you ever struggle with insecurity? Well, that's a dumb question. Of course you do. We all do, on some level, struggle with feeling insecure. And you know what is the worst thing we can do to manage that? Start to compare ourselves with others. But guess what? We all do it. And it's so painful. Guys, brace yourselves because this episode of Crazy Blessed may get a bit violent. Yeah, we're going to kill comparison. And we're not going to do it on our own. We have my special friend, Nona Jones, with me today. Nona is a motivational speaker, author. She's the head of global faith-based partnerships with Facebook, and she's here with us today, ready to do some of that dirty work and kill comparison for good today on the Crazy Bless Show. Nona, I am so excited you're with me today on the Crazy Bless Show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always a joy. I love hanging out with you. You are someone who you walk in a room and it's just you have this magnetic energy, like you take over. And I love that about you. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, when I read that you struggle with insecurity in your book, Killing Compared, I'm like, no, Nona doesn't struggle with that. No, she is so confident. She exudes confidence. But for you to just be raw and real, I think is so refreshing and so needed today. So first of all, thank you for helping us all follow suit and kill comparison.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, this is a book. It's so funny. This is a book that I was not planning on writing. And yet, as I've seen people's response to it, it's just been an incredible testament to God. I mean, my goodness, I had no idea. I kind of thought it was just me, but it's been a blessing to see that I'm not alone. So yeah.
Well, tell me what led to this, because you said you didn't plan on writing this book. So God evidently planned on you writing this book. So what happened in your life that brought this about?
Listen, so back in 2020 was going to be an amazing year for me. Like I had two books coming out. I was, scheduled to speak all over the country, all over the world even. And then of course the pandemic happened and my calendar got cleared because events got canceled. And one morning, I was about to log onto a video conference for work, and I just so happened to open up my Instagram app because I was going to respond to some comments before I got into the meeting. And I caught a glimpse of my news feed. And there was a post from a friend of mine who was sharing that she was so excited because she was going to be speaking at this huge women's conference that normally met in person, but it was going virtual because of the pandemic. And she was inviting people to get registered. And I saw it and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I scrolled down a little more. And there was another friend who was also posting the exciting news that she would be speaking at this conference. And I scrolled down more and it was like another friend and another and another and another. And I ended up knowing all of the speakers. I knew the host, and I immediately started to wonder, like, why wasn't I invited to speak?
Wow.
Like why wasn't I good enough? Why was I overlooked? It got so bad that I clicked on their profiles. I was like, well, how many followers do they have in comparison to me? I clicked on their website. I was like, what other events are they speaking at in comparison to me? And I think in that moment when I was drowning in the questions like, why her, not me? Why am I not good enough? I heard the Holy Spirit ask, Nona, why does it matter? And I was like, what do you mean, why does it matter? It matters because there's this huge event happening and I won't be speaking at it. And God was like, so do you think you only matter to the extent of the speaking invitations you receive? And I was like, no. I was like, I know I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I know I'm a royal priesthood. I started to spout out, all the scriptures. And God was like, well, Nona, your problem is not what you know in your head. Your problem is what you believe in your heart. And because you believe that other people's approval defines who you are insecure. And I was like, what? So in that moment, I started to pray. And I just so happened to be studying in the book of First Samuel. And I talk throughout the book about Jonathan, Saul's son, because I happened to be reading about him at that point. and I started to see him in a new light. And what happened was I was invited to preach at a church a few months later, and I decided to preach the message called Killing Comparison. It was just sharing what God had shown me about
Right.
myself, sharing about Jonathan. And the way people responded to the message, I was like, there's something here. And
Mm.
that's what made me start to actually write the book. So that's what happened.
Oh my goodness. And you could have never anticipated that. Like, and that's why, the things that we go through, like someone needs to know this right now, the things that we go through that cause us anguish or pain, or the Holy Spirit comes in and says, hey, hold up, that can be leveraged in such a beautiful way. Like you could have stayed in this place where you're like feeling a little discontent and wow, why her, not me? Or you could say, God, just be open. God, what does this mean?
Yeah,
What do I do with this feeling now? Because I think that's a big problem is people don't know what to do with feelings. So what do I do with this right now? And he's like, yeah, let's go into this place of comparison.
that's
And
exactly what happened.
so beautiful what happened as a result of that. And you found a message that truly resonates with people. But this leads me to my next question. Why does this resonate with people so much right now?
I think we are in a state as a society, not even just here in the United States, I think around the world, we're at a state where we have other people's lives at our fingertips. I mean, and it's not even just that we have their lives at our fingertips. We have their highlight reel at our fingertips. And I think it's because, there's all these awesome social technology apps that are giving us access to each other. But we share the day that we got the new car. We don't share the day it was repossessed. We
Wow.
share the day that we got engaged. We don't share the day that we got divorced. Like we share the highlights. And so what happens is we begin to compare our reality to the curated fiction of other people's lives, and then we feel like we don't measure up. And so that's always been the case. I mean, look, social media gets blamed for causing insecurity. I don't believe that's the case. I
No.
think social media exposes our insecurity, but it's not the source. I mean, we had these issues before Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. We would see somebody in the grocery store and they would, look amazing because they just lost 20 pounds. And suddenly we would feel horrible about ourselves. And so I think that's why is we're just in a state where it's just heightened awareness of other people's highlight reels. And I think that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to live confident in who God
Yeah.
made them to be. And that's hard when you're surrounded with all the good stuff in other people's lives.
That's so true. Like it feels so nice to hear you say, I want people to live in confidence of who they're created to be. But truly, Nona, you know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. When we have this thing with us all the time,
Yeah.
and it almost becomes like there's a button on your butt. And as soon as you sit down, you open up the phone. Or like the moment there's a lull in anything, you go to your phone. Like it's so easy to do that. And it's not this person's fault. It's this person's fault. And so we have to take responsibility. But how do we do that? How can we stay confident when we're constantly been, and by our own volition, we choose to do this. We choose to get this, as you said, this curated reality of other people's lives and then hold ourselves up against it. How do we stay in this environment? Because we don't want to unplug. We don't want to, like remove ourselves and go live on acres somewhere
Right,
apart from
right.
everything, right? We are in the world, but not of the world. So how do we stay in the world, be a part of society, and not become influenced by it?
I think we have to first realize fundamentally that we were created worthy. Like Jeremiah chapter 1:5 is such a profound verse that I think we've become so familiar with that we miss just how profound it is. So it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. We know that part. But if you actually slow down and think about what God is saying, He said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. A lot of times we think life begins at conception when the sperm meets the egg. But what God said there is before the sperm met the egg, I knew you. You had purpose, you had identity. And so what happens is many times we're born with this incredible purpose and potential and value on the inside of us. But because we see other people and what they're doing, and maybe they're being applauded for what they're doing and we're not, we begin to use other people as the measuring stick for our value without
Wow.
realizing it. It happens so
Yeah.
subtly. And so I think it's really important for us to realize that insecurity is not a function of self-esteem. We think, well, if I just memorize the scriptures about how much I'm loved by God, if I just memorize positive affirmations, then I won't be insecure. But insecurity is not about self-esteem. It's really a question of what is your identity secured to? What are you looking to determine your worth, to determine your value? Some of us, it's our academic credentials. And what happens is we'll see somebody else with a more prestigious degree, maybe more degrees, and we feel threatened because our identity is secured to an academic credential. But the reason why that's an insecure foundation is because not all academic credentials are created equally. An MBA from, I don't know, the University of Bedside Baptist doesn't have as much prestige as an MBA from Harvard, right? And
Right.
so we end up comparing ourselves to other people because of insecurity. And that's really what I was trying to get across in the book.
And that is so powerful when we really think about what we're using to hook our identity to. I think we do this subconsciously, that we're not even really aware that we're doing it. I remember talking with this one woman, and she put down her phone. She was at my home, and she put down her phone. She's like, Hannah, this is the weirdest thing. I was feeling so great and so positive like an hour ago, and something just happened to my energy. And I said, what happened in that last hour? That's so odd. Because I was just, doing stuff around the house, and she was doing her thing. And she's like, all I was doing was I got on my phone. I said, well, what did you do on your phone? And she started to scroll. And she said, now I realized I was just looking at everyone who has more than I have, who's doing more than I'm doing, who looks better than I look. And now all of a sudden her energy went from here and plummeted. And I think that's like, we all know the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so I think some people are going through life exhausted in the comparison. Like, we're
Mhm.
so busy trying to evaluate our worth based upon our circumstances that we don't give it enough time to really anchor in our identity and who we are in Christ. And when we can't do that, there's no joy. And when there's no joy, there's no strength. So,
Absolutely.
I mean,
100%.
I don't know if you've ever realized this, like all of a sudden, like the energy can just drop. If you think, like, how did you feel when you were about to get on this meeting and then all of a sudden you saw all these people? Like, did your energy go up or down?
So it depends on the day. Like, so I'm what's called an ambivert. And
Yeah.
so I have both extroversion and introversion. And
Yeah.
so sometimes, like, if I'm walking into a situation where there's a bunch of people, I feel great. I'm like, let's go, let's do it. Other times I can be like, oh gosh, so it just
Yeah.
depends. I would say today I felt actually energized.
Well, what about that day? That day where you got on and you saw everyone who was speaking at this
Oh,
women's
oh
event and
yeah,
not you?
no. Listen,
Like,
in
what
that
happened to your energy?
Yeah, no, in that scenario, so it was funny, like the first post I saw, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like I was just like really happy for my friend. And I was like, that sounds like a great event. And I think the more that I saw it, the more I did feel, and so I talk about this concept in the book about how two people can see the same post. One person can see it and be inspired by it. They can be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Like, this is exactly
Yeah.
what I want to do with my life. And so it activates potential. Another person can see it and be expired by it. And that
Wow.
is discouraged, depressed. That's when you begin to question your worth. I think the more that I saw the posts and the more that my brain started to be like, why wasn't I invited? The more expired I began to feel. And I think that definitely was an indicator that there was something on the inside of me that I needed to get victory over.
Do you think women struggle with this more than men do?
I think that we struggle with it pretty equally, but I think it's expressed differently. Like, I think
Okay.
because society tends to tends to place value on us in a very superficial way, in like how we look, and are we the best so-called mom and the so-called wife? And I think because of that, our insecurity may show up in what we see. Whereas in men, a lot of times their value is placed in being the smartest and the best, and being the
Mm,
first. And so if they aren't perceived as those things, I think that they do nurse a sense of insecurity. And frankly, that's why there tends to be this kind of bravado, and I gotta act like I've got it all together, like I'm not afraid of anything.
right.
That's actually an expression of insecurity.
Wow.
Because if you truly are not afraid, you don't have to act like it. You just are. You're unafraid, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, that's how it tends to show up in men.
It's like we're compensating for that insecurity by putting out this false,
100%.
view of, oh, no, this is what I'm really like. I'm super confident. I think we're trying to convince ourselves as well as try to tell the world something about ourselves. But so how do we kill comparison? Like, I know, how are we going to do this in 10 minutes? I'm not asking that, but what can we get started doing now so that we're not drained by what we think we have to be in the world, so we can anchor into God's view?
Well, I think the first step is we have to be willing to recognize it. And honestly, that seems like a very obvious thing, but it's actually really hard because I think we spend far more time and energy denying that we're insecure than defeating it. If you would have asked me 2, 3 years ago, like, Nona, do you struggle with insecurity? I would have said, absolutely not. Like, look at all I've done, look at all I'm
Yeah.
doing, while nursing deep insecurity. And so I
Wow.
think first we have to recognize it. And I think the way we recognize it is when we see another person succeeding and we feel like we're failing, if we see another person winning and we feel like we're losing, there is definitely a seed of insecurity on the inside of us. And I think we have to be willing to admit that. And then once we admit it, the second step, which I talk about extensively in the book because I believe there's a ton of power in this, is we have to begin to reframe the things that trigger toxic comparison in us so that it
Okay.
actually inspires us. So to give you an example, let's say, I've been there, you're on a weight loss journey and you just want to get rid of these last 20 pounds. And then a friend of yours makes a post about how she lost 50 pounds and she looks amazing. And normally you would be like, oh, I'll never lose weight no matter what I do. Look at her. She looks amazing. And then here I am looking like a bag of flab. I've called myself that. So you would say that as a natural reaction, but the way you reframe it is, oh, wow, look at what she did. I wonder if I can learn from her. I
Mm,
wonder if she can maybe teach me how she's been successful. So now I don't see her as a threat. I see her as an opportunity to learn and grow. That's how you reframe it so that now it's activating your potential. It's no longer expiring the way that you see yourself.
oh, that is so beautiful. I love that because I feel like when someone's doing something that you want to be able to do, and someone's providing evidence that it can happen, then you're either you're looking for evidence, like, okay, there, now I can do it too, or you're looking like, well, see, that person makes it easy and I can't do it because it's too hard for me. Like, our perception is everything. So if we have a filter of we're already worthy, then that filter starts to show everything we look at, all the accomplishments out in the world, as, wait, I'm already worthy. So now this is evidence that I can go to the next level. And I think this thing that you're talking about, I think it comes up like if high achievers are listening, watching this, I'm sorry, if high achievers are listening or watching this, they're already thinking, I want to be in the room with people who are achieving more than me. Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's what we're trained. Like, we always want to get into a room that challenges us. However, when we're in that room, if we struggle with insecurity, that is going to magnify that and be like, wow, now I feel like I'm not doing enough. And so we
Mhm.
can realize that and start to reframe it. But is there a way to use that to really like channel the energy to achieve more, if that's what we're going for?
Oh, for sure. Like I think when we see somebody else succeeding, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, like we can have one of two responses. We can either look at it and say, oh my gosh, that's so unfair. Oh my gosh, I'll never be like that. We can look at it as an indictment on our worth, Or we can look at it and say, wow, if they can accomplish that, what can I accomplish, right? Like they did it. I actually, this is why I tend to post, not all the time, but I'll post pretty consistently about like my own weight loss journey, because I've had people, and I actually posted about it just this morning. I've had people say things to me like, oh, it must be nice to be skinny, or, oh, we can't all be skinny like you. And I'm like, I can't be skinny like me without working out, because I actually lost over 100 pounds, like 110 pounds, and I've kept it off for 10 years. And so I post my before and my after because I want people to know, like, listen, I didn't come out the womb fit. Like, this is something I have to work for. And so you can be inspired by another person. You can be inspired by what they do. And what I try to do is, and I tell people this in the book, guard your eyes to guard your heart. If there are people that you're watching who are constantly inspiring you because they never show the hardship, they never show the struggle, they only show the success, unfollow, mute, do something to protect your eyes in order to protect your heart so that you will live a life that's inspired by what other people do and the struggle that they're on. But we have to own that. And it's absolutely possible to be inspired. You just have to make the decision to do it.
I was going to ask you if it's important to limit our exposure, but do you
100%.
think it's important to limit that, or just like time, or just what we're exposing ourselves to, or how we approach it? Like, how do we manage in a very connected world? How do we manage all those connections?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible and necessary to manage who you're connected with. There are so many tools, and I'll start with online just because it's a little bit easier than in real life. Online, you can definitely unfollow, you can mute people. Like, you don't have to keep people's content in your line of sight. I think in real life, we have family, we have friends, we have colleagues, coworkers, who maybe they're just intent on trying to make you see yourself as less than. Like, maybe they're intent on flaunting their success, and it depletes you, it expires you. I think you have to limit the time that you're spending around them, and it's all about protecting your heart, because you know what your triggers are, the things that cause you to feel bad about yourself.
Right.
And until you build up the emotional fortitude to be able to stay in those environments, I would say limit it so that you can protect your heart.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. And it's not like we're hurting other people. We're just protecting ourselves, because we have to be operating in an optimum state. And we can't do that when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others. So
Yes.
if someone is struggling with this and they're watching, they're listening, and they're like, Nona, I get this, and I've tried to do this before. I've tried to do the social media fast. I've tried to really like get more confident in who I am, but I still struggle with insecurity. I still feel
Mhm.
like I want to back out of the room, like I'm not enough. Where can, like, what would be the first step when they do realize that they are trying to navigate it? What could you share with them to help this really anchor in that they are already worthy?
Well, I think it goes back again to Jeremiah chapter 1 and 5. I mean, you had an identity, you had worth before the sperm met the egg, before conception. God, He knew you. He decided you were necessary for creation. And I think it's important for us to know, our God does not make extras. He doesn't make duplicates. Like, every person that He sent to earth was sent with an assignment, with gifting, with a purpose on us. And so the worst thing that can happen is that we're born an original and we die a duplicate. That's the worst that can happen.
Oh,
And I
that's
think,
good.
I mean, I think the cemetery is actually the richest place on earth, because so many people have died with unrealized potential just because, comparison made them think that I won't have any value unless I'm like this person. So I do think we have to anchor our identity to who God says we are. He is our only measuring stick. It should never be another person.
Wow, that is so powerful. I think I need a t-shirt that says that. Don't be born an original and die a duplicate. Like, come
Yes.
on. God
Yes.
has put something in you that He didn't put in anyone else. And
Amen.
how beautiful when we can stand in that place and just grow from it. So I want to thank you so much, not just for the allowing everyone to look into your life and see that you struggle with insecurity, and helping us figure out how to kill comparison. but also being a guest today. Thank you so much.
This has been such a joy. Thank you for having me and also for lifting up this message. It really means a lot to me.
Well, it means a lot to me too. And for everyone who's watching and listening, guys, remember, you can either live in insecurity or you can decide to kill comparison. And when you kill comparison, that's how you live a life that's blessed like crazy.